In Adolo Strands, when it merged our magic with the physics gameplay, that was something that, in terms of philosophy, wanted to achieve for a very long time, is like trying to bring the joyfulness and of physics game and simulation games into a more action-packed game.
To achieve that, every object in the game have a temperature, and we also split the air inside small blocks of air. So everything inside the game have a temperature, and we have heat that can propagate from one object to the air environment. We have the opposite. Cold can also propagate and cool down objects and cool down the air. So in our game, an object can burst into flames simply because the air around it is hot, or something can have its combustion extinguished simply because it's surrounded by cold air. So for the same reason, we have objects that fall into water, can heat the water and produce vapor and have smoke effect and stuff like that. So it's all of our environment is simulating temperature, so we can have cold propagation, heat propagation that can start fire and can be extinguished by other effects. So if I can give an example, fire breath of a dragon will actually heat the environment and start fire, and that fire will also heat the environment and have fire propagation.
So if, by example, you're having like the fire drake that will blast fire into your face, you can cast a wall of ice and reflect that fire to heat back on other NPCs around the heat, which is pretty fun. But with these spells also, you can lift stuff with physical force, like there's the TK, that's pretty fun to play around. And I think we haven't spoke about yet is synergy. So you can mix and match your spells. If you're, by example, creating a bubble of force, you can cast fire into it and create a ball of fire.
And typical games, when you put fire or you play with cold, it's living in a bubble around the player. In our case, the way it's built, it's throughout the whole gameplay area, the whole square kilometer of terrain. So if you're in a situation where you can put enough heat environment, then the whole map can be on fire. And we don't restrain the player with that. There was a lot of thought and a lot of optimization to make that work. But it's the whole level can be on fire, the whole level can be frozen. Half the map can be on fire and the rest of the map can be freezing cold too. All of that combines and work, and we're never limiting the player on what kind of impact it can have on the world. The idea behind having all those power was to break the mold of the typical gameplay that have its own sets of rules. So when I was a kid, I was playing a lot of D&D, and a fireball in D&D does a certain amount of D6 of damage. That's a very, very specific rule that is only usable when you are doing a fireball. In our case, we create fire. That fire can be combined with anything else. So instead of having very specific rules for specific power, we do it in a systemic way that will let them be combined with other elements in the game, letting the player use his imagination to be able to create his own effect and playing with rules instead of playing with a very, very specific set of gameplay elements. It's giving tools to the player to create his own chaos. Let them mess with the environment and mess with NPCs, and once that player understands the rules, then it's just playing with them, as opposed to just trying to use very fixed rules of gameplay elements. Unreal's physical animation system that we built upon essentially have physicality in each limbs of a creature. So you can think of a typical game when you play an animation, you move the mesh of the NPCs and the hand move around in space and stuff like that, but there's no real mechanism for it to avoid it going through collision or going through a wall or something like that. So that's why in multiple games you'll see a sword go through and stuff like that. In our case, hands have weight, knees have weight, the head have weight, and all of that impacts how we play the animation. The whole body of the creature tries to follow the animation as opposed to having the animation dictate how a body moves. And because of that, if I try to punch through a wall, then the hand obviously will not be able to go through the wall and will stop there. The whole body will still try to go through. And because every part of the creature have mass, you'll physically see the creature trying to punch and having his arm being blocked, having a physical impact on how the rest of the body. So it creates a lot more realistic movement. But on something that is 25 meters tall, it conveys a lot of sense of weight. So when you see something like that, it feels real. It feels that it's interacting with the environment. For example, if it walks through a tree, then the tree will block some part of it, and you'll have immediately the feeling that, okay, it hit that tree, it broke through the tree, but it imparted some form of physical force and physical impact and realism to seeing that creature move around in the environment.
What the physical animation allows you, for example, in terms of gameplay, is you can have a giant like snapping trees in his wake. He can take the trees with his hand, throwing at you. He can throw it back using the spells.
You can hinder the creature's movement by using your ice power and freeze his arm in space. So for example, if he's trying to stomp you, you can cast ice on its leg and block its knee from bending because it's now blocked. So since we're using physical animation to open a knee, you're not just playing animation. I saw at some point having Fire Drake being his mouth encapsulated in ice. And when he tried to breathe fire, because there was ice in the way, and our fire power follow through collision, so the fire went sideways and killed an NPCs on the side. So it's a completely random thing that it would be very difficult to do, but since our powers are completely systemic, it's something that just happened.
Other example where all the physics simulation brought like emergent situation. There was like this tunnel of force field that a flying creature throw its own fireball in it and then went back towards him as I was jumping in it. So I got catapulted with the fireball and back onto the flying creature, and I latched into it and I started to slay it with the sword. That was amazing. In terms of how the weapon mixed with the magical powers, you have like an ice sword that generates spikes of ice on the ground, and then you can use your telekinesis power to grab them and throw in at foes. You have also the telekinesis bow. It creates like force field in which you can put heat or cold inside it. You can use that same telekinesis bow to create a successive series of bubbles that will detonate one after the other and like all the way up into an epic. You can use the same bubble to use that as a jump pad for you to latch into a very tall epic.
You can use a firebow to create steam and block NPC's vision, so you can create cover for yourself. Because it's a bow, you can fire that way and hide through the steam.
You can breathe fire into a tree log and then use your two-hander sword that is infused with telekinesis to create your own fireball, basically.